Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of a Lunch and Learn, where we're going to talk about generative AI. By way of introduction, this is sponsored by the Presidential AI Task Force, the College of Business, and the Marshall Libraries. Okay. Title is AI Unleashed, Navigating the Genesis and Evolution of Generative AI. I'm Dr. Rick Weibel. I am a professor of MIS. I've only been at Marshall 30 years, so I'm off to a good start. Well, let's begin with a question. What has had the greatest impact on mankind? Has it been religion? Has it been great philosophers? Has it been empires? Has it been illnesses like the Black Plague? No. The only thing that's really had a dramatic impact on human population and social development is technology. So we see here, starting in the late 1700s, that suddenly population went from 500,000 to today we're over 7 trillion. And how did that happen? Technology. We're able now to feed everyone. And we weren't able to do that before. Well, like most disciplines, artificial intelligence claims to have started with the early philosophers. The US start really happened here in 1950, 56 to be specific, at Dartmouth College. Now this and the last images, most of the images you're going to see today were generated using ChatGPT's or OpenAI's DALL-E. And one of the ways you can always tell DALL-E creates something is it misspells words. And there's some fun things here, like a laptop in 1956. Well, after that initial interest and some research papers to try to get this concept going, nothing really happened. And the reason that was because we didn't have powerful enough computers yet to really be able to take care of the computing necessary to be able to teach the computer to learn. And so as the bullet points on this slide say, faster computers, large data sets that were stored digitally so they could be accessed by those computers, and figuring out the math that was needed to be able to teach the machine something took a long time. But today we have achieved those advancements. And today we see self-driving cars that use visual awareness and location awareness. Your smartphone allows you to talk to it, and it'll translate that into text to speech recognition. In fact, many of the technologies that we take for granted actually are the miracles of artificial intelligence. Well, in November 30th, 2022, only 18 months ago, ChatGPT was launched. Within 5 days, it had 1 million users, and by the end of January, it was pushing 100 million users. It is so popular today that it is getting 2 billion visits per month. Now, there are over probably 100 large learning models out there, but these are some of the biggest ones that are publicly available. So I just read a study this morning that said Claude 3 Opus was the best as of the publication of this survey. ChatGPT is 4 is running a close second. But as you can see, the diameter of the spheres represent the number of data points that these models are being trained on. So we're seeing Claude 3, for example, was trained on 2 terabytes. So we go millions, billions, trillions, and that's a terabyte. That's a lot of data. Now, the part that kind of worries me is just how fast these systems are evolving. So we start back at the bottom in 2019, and we had just 10 million data points. By late 2019, we've reached 1 billion data points. 8 months later, we've reached 10 billion. And today, we're approaching 500 billion data points in the biggest models that they're being trained with. Now, this is a logarithmic graph. And so if we looked at this as a regular graph, it would be much more a curve like this. And now we're in the portion of the arrow that is almost pointing straight up. The development of the personal computer, well, and all computer systems, follow what we in computer science call Moore's Law. And Moore's Law was stated by Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of the Intel Corporation. And he observed that every 2 years, the number of transistors or other components that we could put on a little 1-by-1 integrated circuit chip doubled. And the price actually went down. So over the last 80 years, we've seen this tremendous development of computing power. Ray Kurzweil has estimated that by 2029, in just 5 years, that our personal computer, our cell phones, and our personal computers will have the same computing power that we do. But when we look at the evolution of these large language models, or generative AI, or neural learning computing, we see that the scale is going almost straight up. And the process is actually going 10 times faster than Moore's Law predicted for hardware components. We're seeing these models get 5 times bigger every year. And that's going to continue to mean that these models are just going to be as big as possible. So what is generative AI? Well, the backbone lies in a technology concept called neural networks. And neural networks are the attempt of us humans to figure out how our brain works. So we have neurons and synapses connections, and some magical way, we can see the letter W on this slide and recognize that it is a W. So in our brain, there are little synapses that get excited when they see parts of this letter, and they work through a hierarchy to say, oh, that's a W. At least that's the way we think they work. And mimicking that, that is the way that neural networks work. We'll see a visualization in a second. Generative adversarial networks, were created in 2014, and the ability to take, as the next bullet point says, a generator and a discriminator, and we train them simultaneously, and we have them compete with one another, and that has really improved the accuracy of the outputs of our large language models. So this is a simple depiction of a neural network. On one side, we have input nodes where we put information into the neural network. Through the middle, we have a number of hidden nodes. And then on the right side, we have the output nodes, or the guess that the neural network is going to give us as a result. So how does this work? Well, each of those hidden cells actually uses matrix algebra to calculate its best guess. And when we look at the example, the first one on the screen, I went to those words are the input nodes. Our large language model then takes those inputs as the left side of our diagram and manipulates their values through each of these nodes, and then it comes back with an answer, its best guess, which in this case is store. Now, second example, we see more words. Well, the more words we put in, the more accurate the large language model is going to be in its result. And we'll see in a little while that what it's actually doing is it's just guessing one word at a time. Well, is this an angel or a demon? It's brought many positive impacts to the world through things like artistic expression. So as I've said, all of these images that you're seeing have been generated by AI. Although I did win an art contest in Cabell County when I was in the second grade, which was, who knows, in the mid-50s. I'm not much of an artist today. I could never visualize the drippy cotton candy clouds that we see, or the music scale, let alone put it all together in this beautiful form. Now, there's a great music app called Sunno, or Sun AI, sorry, Sunno AI. And there you can go and create songs. Well, I have created some songs. And I was hoping to show them to you, but I guess I closed the web browser. But the other problem is the music will not play. So even though I could open up the website, which I guess I'll do that just through this link. But of course, it didn't show up on the screen. There, we can create all kinds of music, and it's not going to play. Okay. And as far as the written word is concerned, stories, poems, etc., that's what large language models are best at. Science and medicine advances. Part of the reason why the COVID vaccine was able to be developed so quickly was not just DNA technology, but because of artificial intelligence assistance. We're seeing big productivity gains and efficiencies in all areas of industry. We've got examples of how productivity goes up, waste goes down. In the construction industry, we can analyze alternative building materials, reduce costs and environmental impact. And in the energy sector, reduce the electrical energy used by many companies. But it does have its downside. So how do we begin to prepare for the future? Well, the first problem we face is that there's bias in all AI systems. And the bias is not intentional, but it comes from the data that the system was trained on. And the system was trained by pulling information in from the internet as well as other sources. And unfortunately, some of that information was racial, and different socioeconomic disparities are propagated through that data. So one of the things we have to remember when we use any type of AI system is that it may be pretty good outcomes, but it could also be biased in ways that we don't want it to be. Another big problem is because the neural layers are all hidden, it's very difficult to understand what's going on behind the scenes. We don't really know. And in the future, we're going to have things like military drones that are controlled completely by AI. And so we'll be able just to send them out and say, destroy the enemy tank. Well, that's great as long as it works correctly all the time. But it is a concern. Accountability and transparency. Who's responsible for the decisions that we follow or the AI follows if it makes a mistake? The legal system hasn't caught up with these problems, although the European Union did pass a much debated AI law in the last couple of weeks. In economic development and employment, it is going to drive success. And part of that is going to cost jobs that increase in productivity we talked about a minute ago is going to displace workers. We're going to see more billionaires being created because of this technology. So wealth inequality is going to continue to change the world in which we live. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to look at the skill gap and try to train the workforce so they're prepared for these new jobs. In the areas of security and privacy, I listen to the major news organizations, and they are all the time talking about the worries about deep fakes and the spreading of disinformation. We have surveillance and privacy issues, as well as the misuse of data. Your cell phone has a GPS that is telling your cell phone provider where you're at all the time. Whenever you make a phone call, they know who you're calling. They know how long you talked. When you send a text message, they know what you said. When you post things on Facebook or do a search in Google Chrome, Google knows all the web pages you're going to. They collect so much data about us that they probably know stuff about us that we haven't even realized ourselves. Well, how do we go forward? Well, we need some guidelines. We need an ethical framework. We need to foster responsible development and use. So who should develop the guidelines? Well, personally, I think it should be a coalition of many different organizations. Government is going to play the major role, but we as citizens and parts of private and public organizations also need to voice our concerns about how AI is going to be developed. And of course, we need to include the tech community. Now, some people have said, well, we should just stop. And the real problem there is what? Well, we can stop if we want to, but the rest of the world is not going to stop. So would we rather have our creativity and innovative history to continue and let us to continue lead the world in so many areas, or do we want someone else to get ahead? In fostering responsibility for development use, we need to attend more seminars like this, where we learn about what AI is capable of, how fast it's evolving, and how it is beginning to impact the world. Then we need to raise awareness of those around us so that they can consider this new wonderful tool that is in our hands. And finally, we need to reach out to the community and encourage others to be involved. Well, as we look to the future, it could be utopia or it could be dystopia. We have lots of movie examples. For the dystopia side, we have The Matrix and The Terminator. But we can also imagine a utopian side. I'm a Star Trek fan, and so I like the Star Trek economy, where they don't need money anymore. You want something new, you just ask the replicator to make it for you. You want to go somewhere, you ask Scotty to beam you over. I think that we are about to enter a marvelous new future. but we have a role to play. And as decision makers, the ultimate responsibility for that future falls back on our shoulders. Now, how do we talk to these large language models? Well, I kind of like to think about them as having 20 Sheldons who I can go and ask about anything. You know, as Sheldon on the Big Bang Theory was an expert in physics, we've got an expert in medicine. We've got an expert in mathematics. Although I guess I should say as a caveat, large language models are not really good at mathematics yet. And they do struggle sometimes with basic logic questions, but they're getting better all the time. But if you can phrase the question in the right way, they will give you the correct answer. So as I say up here, big brain, but hard to talk to. So when we talk to a large language model, the current, always love it when a word won't come out right. The current term is a prompt. We're giving a prompt to the large language model so it can chat with us. So a couple of things we should remember, and we'll go over these in a little greater detail as we keep going, is number one, write clear instructions. Number two, ask the model to adopt a persona. We can use delimiters if we want it to look at different parts of our prompt. If it's a complex task, we can break it into steps. If there's a specific format that we would like the answer in, and we have some examples, then we can provide examples. If we want a really short output, we can say, can summarize this into one sentence. So one of the things I feel is always really important is to always ask the model to include inline citations. So when it gives me an answer and it has some data somewhere that it's getting that answer from, I want it to tell me that source. Because as you've probably heard, large language models are given to have hallucinations, which means sometimes they just make it up. And sometimes you can even ask for a citation and it will come up with a citation that lists one of the major researchers in the area in a journal that is frequently published in, and a title that sounds great, and give you a publication date and page numbers and other reference information so you can go find the original document. And when you go look, you find that it was all made up. None of it was really true. Okay, and then the last one is kind of repeating one of the earlier ones. So how do we write clear instructions? Well, you have to remember a couple of key things. The computer can't read your mind. It's like Sheldon. It can't pick up on any social clues. It doesn't know what you're thinking about. If the output's too long, ask it to shorten it. If it's too simple, ask for it to answer like it's talking to an expert. If it's too complex, say, explain this to a 5-year-old. I like that one a lot. If you don't like the format, tell it how to format. Things like use bullet points or just write 3 sentences. The less the model has to guess what you want, the more likely you'll get a great answer. I have been so impressed with the quality of the output that I've been receiving that I use ChatGPT virtually all day long. Anytime I have a question about almost anything, I have an expert right here at my fingertips. So the tactics kind of re-talk about the things that we've already talked about. So let's move on and look at a couple of examples. So you could ask a question to ChatGPT, how do I add numbers in Excel? Well, that ChatGPT will say something like use the equals and the plus sign. Well, that doesn't help much. So a better prompt is to explain exactly what you're trying to do. I have a table of dollar figures. I want to add up each row and put the total in a column on the right and call it total. And guess what it'll do? It will tell you exactly how to do it. And you can read these others. The third one is write some code. It does a very good job of writing program code that you can run on your computer. I use it frequently to write Visual Basic macros, so I can add new functionality to Office products as I want to. So unfortunately, I didn't start this till right before this presentation, but I wanted the ability to add a web page into my presentation. So I asked ChatGPT to write me some code on how to do that. And it gave me some code and I got an error. So I told it the error. It said, oh, that's a general error. Here, let's try a different approach. And it gave me some more code using ActiveX, which is a pretty old technology. And that didn't work either. So I was about to ask it again, but I didn't have time. Now, it's great at summarizing. So is the bottom prompt, summarize the meeting notes, much better to say, I want it in a single paragraph. Then write down a markdown list of speakers and each of their key points. And finally, give me any next steps or action items that are suggested. And it does it. It does it really well. It's phenomenal. Now, second step we talked about was giving it a persona. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can add a persona. One of the things that I've recently discovered is called the playground. And so there's a link there to ChatGPT's playground. We're going to look at a screenshot of it in a minute. Now, you do something here where we have the system instructions. That is where you put in your persona. So when I write something, you will reply with a document that contains at least one joke or playful comment in every paragraph. So then your prompt, write a thank you note to my steel bolt vendor for getting the delivery in on time and in short notice. This has made it possible for us to deliver an important order. Then you hit the submit button and it gives you this fun answer. Dear steel bolt vendor, I wanted to take a moment and extend my sincere gratitude. I'm not going to read it all, but the end sentence says, it's safe to say you really bolted into action. And then the next paragraph, the last line, we couldn't have screwed things up without you. You really know how to raise the bar. You're always a bolt of inspiration to us. Now, these are very corny, I realize. but I'm a corny guy, so I think they're great. Now, I couldn't have written anything like that myself. I don't think it would have come to me. But this is a picture of the screen as it looks. There's a little more to it than this. Maybe if we have time, we'll look at one in a minute. Okay, so on the left column, we see the system, and the default prompt is "you're a helpful assistant." But again, we can put whatever persona we want in there. You're a 5-year-old in kindergarten, or you're an expert and know a lot about the area, or whatever you want to say and how you want that to work. Then in the center at the top is your user prompt. So you'll type in your request there. If you need to add files or other information, you can use the add message button. And then at the bottom, we have the submit button, where it will take our prompt, use our persona, and give us a great answer. Now, there are several other settings that we can adjust when we use a large language model. Number one is shown as the model, number one. And in the playground, you can go from 3.5 up to GPT-4 Turbo. First one, though, is temperature. The higher the temperature, the more creative the response is going to be. So you're freeing it up to not be so exact in how it answers. So if you get really high in temperature, like, I don't know, 10,000, you're probably going to find some hallucinations going on. The lower the number, the less creative it will be, but also you gain a little bit in accuracy. Now, something that is very similar to that is top P, which is what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth item down or third item up. And the top P looks at the probability cutoff point for the guesses that it's going to use. So it's got a default setting. I'm not sure what that probability is. My guess is 70% or 80%. But you can reduce that, which will give you greater variability in the answer, or you can increase it, which will make it have the most accurate guesses. So as I have in red at the bottom, you really only need to set one of these because they kind of do the same thing. The third item from the top is a maximum length. And so when the playground, you can set a word count for how many words you want your maximum answer to be. You can also enter a stop sequence. So you can say, it's very similar to the link thing, only you can just type it in instead of using the slider bar. And then at the bottom, we have penalties, frequencies, and presence. And so these count the number of times that words are used. And so if you want it to have a larger vocabulary, then you would put the penalty at a low number. Generally, they do the same thing. There is more information in the playground about what the settings do, but that's the basis of how that screen works. Now, the other way you can set a persona is when you go to the main ChatGPT page In the lower left corner, you'll find your name. When you click that, a little box will pop up. And as I've underlined in red, you click the custom instructions. So here are my custom instructions in the bottom. I'm a college professor at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. Now that's not very much, but you can give it a lot more information if you want it to know more about your situation, or if you're asking about some specific situation, like you want an opinion on some public law, then you could say something about, I'm a concerned citizen in this state and this law is before the legislature and I don't feel it's a good law. So your prompt then would be, help me define arguments against this law. Okay, so that is the beginning. In the middle, and when you see this on the screen there above and below, is how would you like ChatGPT to respond? And so this is what I currently have in my response box, and I've put it up higher and made it a little bigger. Frequently, it will apologize when it gives you an answer. It'll say, well, I'm just an AI and I don't know everything. And I had a cutoff date of September 11th, 2021 or something. So it will give you a bunch of information. So I tell it, don't say any of that. If you don't know the answer, say you're unsure. Don't tell me you're not a professional or an expert. I know that. Don't tell me to talk to an expert or a doctor. I'll figure that out on my own. Provide information without emphasizing the cautions or needs for professional, because that's one of the things it does, is it wants to remind you, hey, I'm just a crazy computer. You need to talk to humans and not just do what I'm suggesting. And then prioritize correctness over conformity or harmony. And then there's a little box that also pops up that gives you these thought starters for the input you put in, how you want it to respond. Okay, so here's one of the things that was suggested earlier, and that is use delimiters. And so here we're saying summarize the text delimited by triple quotes with a haiku. And I got a link. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a minute to switch, I guess. But okay, so now let's see if I can do this the other way. No, I can't. So as the screen says, I got two monitors and the screen in front of me is different than the screen behind me. Well, you can read what it says, and here you see the temperature and the different settings in the playground. And so when you click submit at the bottom, it's going to write a short story. Well, it's going to look at this and give us a haiku. Coding prodigy, AI psychologist plus brilliant problem solver. I'm not much of a haiku person, but that sounds kind of fun. Okay, and as we see when we switch back to the other screen. Was that other choice just okay? There are some other suggestions, and the source of all of these was from the OpenAI prompt manual. So OpenAI has this great manual that you can use to learn more about prompting. So one of the things that we read earlier were request steps to follow. So here's an example of that. Use the following step-by-step instructions to respond to user inputs. Step 1 and then step 2. So in this example, we're going to take some text, summarize it, and translate it into Spanish. So here we see some text about the Apollo missions. Now you see how it's doing word by word by word? That's its guessing the next word it wants to say. And then it translates it into Spanish. Well, if you haven't figured it out already, I barely speak English. So I have no foreign language capabilities at all. But I've been told that ChatGPT is excellent at translating. Here is an example of providing an example. And so the river that carves the deepest valley flows from a modest spring. That would be the example. And again, you can then prompt it by saying, use this example and teach me about the ocean. And guess what it does? It writes a sentence very similar to that one. Specifying the length, you can, as the first item here says, 50 words, or the second item, 2 paragraphs, the third item, 3 bullet points. Now, what's the future look like? This is my favorite part. You see that funky looking little egg thing in the guy's hand? That's called an O1 light. And it's unbelievable. We're going to watch just a couple of minutes of this video. And we lost audio. We had audio for a minute. So something about teams. This is Killian Lucas, a transgender individual. So when you listen to the video, the voice is deep and it's a little bit confusing. But I'll post a link to this video in the chat. So she asked, when's the next sunny day going to be? Now she wants to know if there's any concerts going on that day. Bad Bunny is playing. She says, send a text to her friend, do you want to go to this? Then she goes back to her home. And shows how what she's doing is being controlled. She's controlling her home PC. I'm sorry, this doesn't work. And so she's training it now how to send a Slack message. And Slack is a chat program that's used in many business areas, especially by tech guys. So she says, I'm going to train you on how to do a new task. So open Slack. The system says, I do it right. She says, yes. And then she says, send a message to Mike or somebody. And it opens the Mike message. She says, click in the text box. It moves the cursor down, clicks in the text box. She tells it what to type. It types the message. She says, click send, and it sends the message. And at each step, it said, did I do that right? Did I do that right? So she's able to train it to do multi-step, complex problem solving on her PC. So no more running the mouse around, no more writing little programs to do this or that. The light will do it for you. You can buy one for $100. I ordered mine a couple of days ago, I guess Friday maybe. Okay, then she says she teaches another skill using email. So whenever she gets a new email with an invoice attached, she tells it to send a Slack message to her accountant. I'm sorry that the audio is not working. We'll figure out why. It's something in Teams. We narrowed it down that far. The fastest hardware available right now is from Grok. There's lots of Groks out there. This one is ROQ, and Grok is lightning fast. Okay. So why it works right here, I don't know. But as soon as
and innovations, the Cambrian explosion of AI devices. In the next few weeks, we're going to release an open source language model for computer control.
Okay, I figured out why it's not working. I wasn't sharing the audio. Okay, here's Grok. Sorry, I didn't already log in. So I don't know if you saw how fast it created that page, but Grok, the company, has developed what they call an LPU, a language processing unit that runs much faster than the way currently large language models are trained using GPUs. NVIDIA, is the major GPU manufacturer. They're introducing a new chip called Blackwell. There's all kinds of stuff out there. The bottom point here is Devin. It's an AI programmer that has multiple parts, so it will write code, it will debug its own code, correct the code, try it again. And so programmers are going to be a thing of the past. Well,